Hello everyone, and welcome back to Gods and Myths of Northern Europe, part 18 or 17. Can't really remember which one. It's been a rough week. Where we last left off, we are about to discuss the god of the sky. So, let's get into it. The mother of Thor was said to be Earth herself. In the earliest Gallic verse, he is described in phrases meaning son of Earth. Of his wife Sif, we know little except that she had wonderful golden hair. It has been suggested that this was the sign of an ancient fertility goddess, her abundant shining hair typifying the golden corn. There is an undoubted link between Thor as a thunder god and the fertility of the earth, at which the lightning strikes in the rain falls, causing increase. Adam of Bremen writes of Thor as the most important of the gods because of this power over the seasons. They say he rules the air, which controls the thunder and the lightning, the winds and showers, the fair weather and the fruits of the earth. Thor was a scepter. With a scepter seems to represent Jove. From the history of the bishops of Hamburg. It is in keeping with this link between Thor and the earth that we find many of the first Icelandic settlers taking with them from Norway not only the high seat pillars from Thor's temple, but also earth from between the pillars. Moreover, they were careful to hollow the land which they took for themselves in the name of the god before they built their dwellings upon it and sowed their crops. In his association with the natural world, Thor was thus both destroyer and protector. He was regarded in Viking times as a sure guide for those who traveled over the sea. Because of his power over storms and wind, he was the god to be invoked for journeying. Even Helgi the Lean, one of the early Icelandic settlers, who had been converted to Christianity, was said to continue to call on Thor whenever he had a sea voyage to make. Thor could call down storms against his adversaries, as when he raised a tempest against Olaf Tryggvason by blowing out his beard, urged on by his worshipper Rod. Rod said, "Blow out the bristles of your beard against him, and we will resist them stoutly." Thor said not much would come of that, but nevertheless they went out, and Thor blew hard into his beard and puffed out the bristles. Immediately a gale came up against the king. Thor is said in Flayamana Saga to appear to a Christian convert in a dream, big and red-bearded, and to threaten him that it should go hard with him on his journey. He led him to a cliff and showed him great waves breaking over the rocks, saying, "Into such rough seas shall you come and never be delivered from them, unless you turn to me." Poems quoted in Nidjal's Saga declare that Thor stirred up the storms which shattered the ship of the Christian missionary, Thangbrand. Thor's power over the sea might of course be used more positively to benefit his worshippers, as when he is said to have stranded a whale on the shores of Vinland in response to the prayers of Thor Hall, one of the explorers. Thor Hall boasted to his Christian companions, "Redbeard, he has got the better of your Christ. I have done this by my poetry which I made about Thor, in whom men trust." The connection between the red beard of Thor and the raising of the wind appears to be emphasized. Perhaps the old explanation that the beard denoted the lightning is nearer the truth than the popular suggestion that Thor's beard made him the typical unshaven Viking. The color of the beard may have been based on the red sky which foretells a storm. Incidentally, the fact that one of the most famous worshippers of the god, Thorolf of Most, was known as Bearded Man of Most, suggests his beard was something worthy of notice, even among bearded Vikings. We may note that the terrible glare of Thor's burning eyes is also mentioned more than once in poetry, in his fearsome voice. The thunder god with his hammer was, as we have seen, equated with the Roman Hercules, but Donar, the thunder god of the heathen Germans, had other associations more distinguished than this. Adam of Bremen suggested that the god with his scepter represented Jupiter, and Saxo alludes to Jupiter's hammers. Others saw the association with the supreme sky god of the Romans. The day sacred to Jupiter, Dies Lovis, the fourth day of the week, Thursday, was dedicated to the Thunderer throughout the Germanic world. We have Punresadag in Anglo-Saxon England, Donnerstag in Germany. It was an important day of the week, and as late as the 7th century, Aegidius, bishop of Noyon, had to reproach his congregation because so many of them still kept Thursday as a holy day. It seems that Donar, Thor's predecessor, like the Greek Zeus, was associated with the great oaks of the forests, which covered much of Western Europe. The Germans, the Celts, whose thunder god was Tannerose, the Baltic tribes, and the Slavs all had holy groves within the forests where the thunder god was worshipped. Grimm suggested that the connection between the god and the oak was a practical one, because the oak tree was the tree most often struck by lightning. The emphasis, however, should probably be laid on the fact that when a great oak is struck by lightning, the sight of its destruction is something unforgettable. A vivid description of this happening, given by Tolstoy in Anna Karenina, is worth quoting to illustrate this. Suddenly there was a glare of light. The whole earth seemed on fire, and the vault of heaven cracked overhead. Opening his blinded eyes, to his horror, the first thing Levin saw, through the thick curtain of rain, between him and the woods, was the uncannily altered position of the green crest of a familiar oak in the middle of the copse. Can it have been struck? The thought had barely time to cross his mind, when in gathering speed the oak disappeared behind the other trees, and he heard the crash of the great tree falling on the others. There is little doubt that this is based on observation, and that Tolstoy had seen an oak falling in a storm. His impression that the heavens had opened up, and that fire from them was descending on to earth, is significant. As a channel through which the power of the sky god might reach down to the world of men, it is understandable that the mighty oak tree itself, a splendid symbol of age, strength, and endurance, came to be considered especially sacred to the Thunderer. Groves which the Germans held sacred to the gods are mentioned by Tacitus at the end of the 1st century. Later on, a number of Christian missionaries, Boniface, Jerome, Bishop Otto, Willibord, counted the felling of a tree sacred to a heathen god among their achievements in the cause of Christ. There is mention of Jupiter's oak more than once. The Prussians remained heathen long after Germany as a whole had been converted. In the 16th century, writers who visited them described sacred woods in which they made sacrifices and sacred springs, which Christians were not allowed to approach. The chief of these sanctuaries was at Ramov, where there was a holy oak, in whose trunk were placed images of the gods. Before that of the thunder god Percono was a fire which was never allowed to go out. The fire was surrounded by curtains, forming a shrine which only the high priest might enter to commune with Percono. The name of this god is linked with the Latin word for oak, quercus. It is probably that Donar too was worshipped in sanctuaries of this type. In England, there are a number of Anglo-Saxon place names in the form of Purnalea, the meaning of which is grove or forest clearing of thunder. One example is the early form of Thunderslee in Essex. Similarly, in Scandinavia, Thor's name is linked with Lunder, grove, and place names in this form are found in Sweden, West Norway, and Denmark. The forest of Thor on the north bank of Liffey outside Dublin existed in the year AD 1000. In that year, King Brian Boru spent a month destroying it, burning down the undergrowth and demolishing young trees, until, as we are told in the Irish poem, the great trees and the lordly oaks alone stood upright. In Iceland, there were no great oaks, and thus the link between the thunder god and the trees has become blurred in the Icelandic sources. But the link was there all the same, and we can discern in the custom of settlers to take the oak pillars of Thor's temple with them to Iceland. The pillar, as we have seen, was sacred to the god, and there seems good reason to believe that this was because the pillar represented the sacred tree, in which the power of the god dwelt. In one case, in Land na Mabok, we read of an early settler who had no high seat pillars to bring with him. But when he reached Iceland, he prayed to Thor, and the prayer was answered. A great tree was washed ashore, big enough to provide pillars for him and for his neighbors also. The high seat pillar formed a support of the hall or temple, and the resemblance between this and the lucky tree, which stood beside the house, and on whose well-being the luck of the family depended, seems a reasonable assumption. In the story of King Volsung, this tree formed a living support to his hall, and there are still a few houses remaining in the British Isles where the building has been supported by a great tree in the center. The lucky family tree was well known at one time in Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Germany. A folk custom still known in England is the raising of a branch from the roof or chimney of a house when the builders have finished the roof, with free drinks all around. One reason given for this is that the house will afterwards be safe from lightning. If this ceremony is carried out in the same way we assume the pillars, hollowed to Thor, would protect the dwelling which they supported from the terrors of the storm. Also, like the sacred tree in the forest, they marked the most holy place, where the worshipper might approach the thunder god and learn his will. Okay, so that was that. Next Friday, we will be going over Thor and his adversaries, so stay tuned. And if you want to like me, subscribe, share, whatever, go for it. If you want to follow my social media, links are in the description. I'll see you in the next video, everyone.